Everyone. I'm Jackie Hughes. I'm the Secretary General of the World Agriculture Forum, and I welcome you all to this webinar, Transforming Global Food Systems for a Changing World, in acknowledgement and celebration of World Food Day. World Food Day this year is calling for global collaboration in creating a peaceful, sustainable, prosperous, and food secure future by working together across governments, organizations, sectors, and communities. We together can transform agri-food systems to assure that everyone has access to a healthy diet and live in harmony with the planet. We're facing unprecedented challenges in agri-food systems: conflict, extreme weather, climatic events, economic shocks, rising inequality. They're all putting pressure on the land we farm, the water we depend on, and the biodiversity that supports life. Supply chains are fragile, and the effects of the disruption is being felt in homes, markets, and fields around the world. What we have for you today is a keynote address and then a panel. The keynote address will be by Dr. Amina Gurib-Fakim. She is the 6th former and first female president of the Republic of Mauritius and a distinguished professor of biodiversity. Her career spans scientific research, public service, and international leadership. Before her presidency, she served as the managing director of CIDP Research and Innovation, focusing on botanical and pharmaceutical development. She's chaired the International Council for Scientific Unions and served as an independent director on the board of Barclays Bank of Mauritius. Throughout her career, she's combined academic rigor with policy advocacy, and her contributions have earned her a long list of international accolades, including the recognition in Forbes 100 Most Powerful Women and inclusion in the top 100 women in Africa twice. We then, on the panel, will have Michael Keller. Dr. Michael Keller is currently the Secretary General of the International Seed Federation. He works to create an enabling environment for the private seed sector, collaborating closely with diverse stakeholders. His expertise spans seed systems, agriculture, food security, law, policy, advocacy, and the SDGs. Prior to joining the International Seed Federation, he worked in the French Senate as a parliamentary advisor, as head of European and International Affairs of the Mayors Association of France, and in different positions at DuPont de Nemours and Pioneer Seed. The other panelist will be Dr. Petra Laus. She is the Chief Sustainability Officer at Syngenta Group, leading global sustainability initiatives across the company's operations. She's had over 30 years of experience in the life sciences industry, and she focuses on minimizing environmental impact while supporting farmers to use existing farmland productively and sustainably. As head of sustainability and corporate affairs for Syngenta Crop Protection, Petra drives the implementation of sustainability priorities in Syngenta's crop protection business unit, together with the safe and responsible use of crop protection products. Before joining Syngenta in 2019, she led the global public affairs function at Novartis for a decade. She's a trained pharmacist with a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry from Kiel University and a master's in public health from Hanover Medical School. So as we move forward into the meat of this event, Dr. Amina, as keynote speaker, will bring her scientific insight, policy experience, and global perspective to the discussion, particularly on equity, resilience, and innovation in agriculture and food systems. Amina, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, and it's always a pleasure to be in your midst, especially within the framework of the World Agriculture Forum. And today, I think we are looking at precisely context setting and vision for reimagining global food systems in a changing world. I think it's a highly appropriate title. And as we know, the challenges we are focusing on could hardly be more important, especially as we head towards the United Nations Climate COP30 and out of the UN Biodiversity COP16 conventions, and where there is now increased attention on our global food system, rightfully so. So, ladies and gentlemen, the world's population will rise to over 10 billion by 2050. This growth has been driven by great advances in healthcare, high levels of prosperity, and longer life expectancy. But these achievements are marred by the knowledge that our successes go in hand with a shameful failure, because 1 in 7 people on our planet will today not have enough to eat. Addressing this failure will be made much harder within a changing climate, because we know that climate change impacts food system at different levels, including changes in soil fertility, crop yield, composition, and bioavailability of nutrients in foods, pest resistance, and the risk of malnutrition. Sustainable and resilient food systems, coupled with climate-smart agriculture, are needed to ensure sustainable diets that are better aligned with contextual ecosystem functions and environmental conservation. So, ladies and gentlemen, the paradox would have it that food production as we practice it is also a major driver of climate change. It accounts for nearly 1/3 of greenhouse gas emission, 90% of land use change, and 70% of water use globally. Rising temperature and more frequent severe weather will have a disastrous impact on the availability and productivity of agricultural land. It is these two intertwined global challenges, food security in an area of changing climate, and their impact on our ambitions for a fairer and more secure world that demands that we pause and we think. Ladies and gentlemen, we live at a time of great contrast. New technologies and the benefits of globalization have created greater prosperity, but this progress has not been shared evenly. Hundreds of millions of our fellow citizens continue to live in poverty and without dignity. Because at the heart of this global inequality lies food and nutrition insecurity, which is intricately linked to the biodiversity crisis, represents a major brake on overall socioeconomic development. The food price crisis over the past years not only had immediate impact on food and nutrition security, food price inflation, and the global economy, but also long-term implications for meeting the Paris climate commitments and the Global Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs in particular, SDG 2. Any collective action taken to meet the twin climate and biodiversity crisis must also address our stressed and fragile food system, upon which the climate stress is set to increase. Research show that despite agricultural advancement over the past 60 years, global farming productivity is 21% lower than it could have been without climate change. In sub-Saharan Africa, crop yields from rain-fed farmlands are forecast to fall as much as 50% by the end of this century, while 8% of fertile land is expected to be transformed into dust bowl, useless for cultivation or grazing. Swift change must come to our global food system. Business as usual cannot continue. The pressure the system faces are too great. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, the global food system received only 3% of public climate finance. Further, climate adaptation finances is only 9% of climate finance, with nearly all of it, 98%, coming from public actors. The share of investments in resilient food system in nationally determined contribution must significantly increase if we are to meet the climate and biodiversity goals while nutritiously feeding a growing population. Ladies and gentlemen, a focus on building regenerative food systems can transition food production on land and at sea from extractive and degrading to the restoration of the lands, waters, and ocean that supply our food. To meet the nutrition needs of feeding billions of people by 2050, we need to improve productivity on existing land. Nature-based solutions such as soil health practices, water management, agroforestry, and restorative aquaculture provide opportunities to boost productivity while mitigating the integrated challenges related to climate, biodiversity, and rural livelihoods. Yet, a lack of investment in research, human resource development, and infrastructure means that yields among the cereals, for example, are a quarter of the world's average and have barely increased in 30 years. As a result, Africa, for example, the continent where the biggest future growth in population is projected, and is already failing to produce enough food to feed its own people. Ladies and gentlemen, we must also acknowledge that by applying known tools, technique, and support traditional practices anchored in ancestral knowledge, the smallholder farmers in Africa and other parts of the world can make a major contribution to global food security. It may now be the only continent which cannot feed its own people, but it is the one that contains some 60% of the world's arable land and with a high percentage remaining uncultivated. Even without bringing more land into cultivation, boosting cereal yields to just half the world's average would turn Africa into a major food surplus region. So our ability to achieve global food security will rely in no small part on our success in supporting a uniquely African green revolution. Then, what are the elements which will make up this transformation into productivity? There needs to be a halt in deforestation. Recent research shows that 90% of tropical deforestation is driven by agriculture. Ending deforestation and land conversion is mission critical to achieving the world's critical climate goals. It is not an option, but a strategic imperative. Halting habitat conversion through commodity production is a time-sensitive intervention that must be fully realized by 2030. To achieve this, public and private sector actors must work together to increase monitoring capacities, enable more traceability in commodity supply chains. Complementing this with comprehensive landscape-level approaches that focus on land tenure security, regulatory reform, stabilizing farmer income, and improving productivity of working lands will be crucial. Investment in agricultural research and development were transformational during the Green Revolution to increase productivity. We need increased investment in new technologies from both public and private actors to now meet the 21st century challenges. These technologies include production-centric tools and those that can improve value chain linkages and supply chain traceability, transparency, such as big data. Ladies and gentlemen, regenerative transitions often take multiple years before benefits accrue to producers. Thus, there is a need to unlock more catalytic financing through debt, equity, and risk-sharing instruments such as insurance or payment for ecosystem services. Importantly, there is a growing need to increase public finance in climate adaptation. Only about $500 million, 1.6% of adaptation finance, comes from private forces, especially as government finances worldwide are increasingly stressed. Ladies and gentlemen, how do we create a level playing field in agriculture? More than $600 billion per year is spent in ag policy support for producers, of which more than 80% has been referred by the OECD as distorting. The actions from government are the most powerful drivers of food systems, and by realigning incentives, the public sector can change the economics that drive change. Governments can focus on repurposing subsidies in their NDCs to promote more regenerative outcomes, including increasing funding to critical areas. For example, repurposing a portion of government spending on agriculture to develop and disseminate emissions-efficient technologies for crops and livestock could not only improve productivity, but also reduce overall emission from agriculture by 40%, releasing about 105 million hectares of agricultural land for restoration to natural habitats. Ladies and gentlemen, we must be reminded that 30% of food produced globally is either lost or wasted, accounting for about 8% of greenhouse gas emission. According to the FAO, if global food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitting country after China and the United States. We need to reduce farm gate losses through post-harvest management systems such as handling, storage, processing cold chains, and other solutions. More public-private partnerships are needed with producers, value chain players, and retailers, as well as increased traceability awareness and communications with consumers to shift behavior on food waste. Context matters, and it's important to understand the interaction and linkages between energy, water, and land in a particular system to develop ecosystem-based approaches. The development of an integrated, diverse, regenerative food energy production can lead to carbon capture and storage and net zero carbon emission. Ladies and gentlemen, so how to create a better path forward? By no means what I have said so far or a panacea to meeting the world's food system challenges. They are, however, a vital and immediate part of that larger suite of policies, technologies, and social levers that are necessary for any lasting positive changes in the world food production system. The crisis we are just experiencing highlights the importance of keeping people and producers at the center of the solution set. The current global population of around 8 billion people depend on food systems, and with more than 1 billion producers and ranchers depending on food systems for their livelihoods and a way of life. We are seeing acute food insecurity and hunger with poorer nations and people who have the least ability to cope being disproportionately affected. This highlights issues of equity and, of course, climate justice. We must keep equity and inclusion at the center of our conservation strategies and ensure that benefits are equitably shared and risk mitigated. At the same time, farmers and producers around the world will be dealing with more and increasing challenges in the future due to climate change. These producers, upon whom all of us depend, are central to these solutions, and their voices need to be elevated as we develop the suite of solutions required. Ladies and gentlemen, if the food system moves in the right direction at the pace and scale needed to stem the climate and biodiversity crisis facing our planet, it will be because producers have made it happen. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Amina. And I think you've hit on points that we understand and find it very difficult to take the right action to be able to create impact. And you've helped us focus a little bit more on how it can be done. And I like the way you spoke from the higher level, which gives us confidence that we can make changes by influencing, as well as just looking at a way to ensure that our agriculture becomes future agriculture, productive, efficient, and profitable, and without affecting the environment in the wrong way. It's got to be a positive effect. To all the people who are listening, I sent a message saying, please put your questions in the chat. Unfortunately, Amina can't stay with us for the whole of this event. If you put questions in the chat and she's still there, maybe she'll answer on the chat, or otherwise we will, as I said, try and get answers back to you. And we'll take a lot of questions at the end as well. So Amina, thank you very much. I'm sure that the panel will pick up on many of the points you raised. So thank you, really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So if we could go on at the moment to the start of the panel, and I'd like to ask Petra something because she brings practical expertise in implementing sustainability strategies, translating corporate commitments into measurable change, and designing partnerships that bridge research, policy, and field level action for systemic transformation. So, Petra, what does systemic transformation mean in practice for our global food systems?
Thank you, Jacqueline, for the invitation. Super pleased to be here. So, Amina, you did a just spot on analysis of where we are, right? I can underwrite every single sentence you are saying. If I come to the question is what does transformation mean in practice, we need to focus on what is the problem. And we have in particular taken for us as goals in Syngenta, where we try to increase productivity with lower impact, actually three shifts we would like to drive. One is moving from expansion to efficiency. You turn this as we need to move the existing land as responsibly as we have. We can't keep clearing forests. We must increase output on the existing farmland. And for that, we are producing the technology as a research-based agricultural company. The second is bridging the yield gap. I can see many people from Africa on the call. So in Kenya, a farmer grows 1.4 tons of maize per hectare when actually 4.2 tons should be achievable, and closing this 2-ton gap would dwarf any climate-related losses. So these opportunity exists in Africa, like you said, Amina, but they also exist in other places around the world, and it's the mid-income countries where we need where we can have most gain in bridging the yield gap. And then from where we are, accelerating the adoption of innovation. We have better seeds. I'm sure Michael is also going to talk about it. We have precision tools for the use of, for the right use of crop protection at the right time on the right fields. We know soil health practices. We are researching biologicals. These aren't future technologies. They are here today, but the challenge actually is getting them faster to the farmers. And so for us, transformation means we are moving at the speed, and we try to address these three problems in particular now, and we need to be faster. That's also what we heard, because productivity growth has slowed less than half of what we need. And if we want to meet 2050 food demand, we need about 2% annual productivity growth, and that's triple of what we have achieved in the last decade.
Thank you very much, Petra. I think in addition to those points, when you talked about the on-farm yields don't match the on-station yields, definitely they don't. And we keep trying to fix that. But then I'm also seeing that all the work we do to increase the potential yield on station is stagnating. So we're having to make a lot of effort to try and get those improvements that we need to feed Amina's 10 billion people soon. But I'll address that again in a minute, Petra. If I could move to Michael on a similar topic, because you've got, Michael, the deep knowledge of seed systems, genetic diversity, and policy frameworks. With that practical perspective of scaling innovations and building enabling environments for those resilient, inclusive food systems, especially for smallholders and developing economies. So, Michael, what does that systemic transformation mean to you for our global food systems?
Jackie, thanks so much for having me. And I mean, really, yeah, it's an impressive talk and an impressive reminder. And certainly would like to come back to some of the points, like the investment part and investment also in research and development, which is a key driver. Let me start, Jackie, with one thing. I'm just back from the World Food Forum. I was yesterday there, and we are very often, we see the problems. And sometimes we even are scared by the problems. But I would like to share one thing. I was for the first time at the World Food Forum, not on the investments are important, not an innovation part, which is also important. I was at the youth, global youth meeting of the World Food Forum. And I must say, when I saw the inspiring talks, also by youth, even by knowing how difficult things are, this is giving energy. And I think my starting point, and we need to be clear, the starting point, and therefore I like also the systemic approach, it's about inclusiveness. It's about we are all together. We need to fix this together. it cannot be only governments. It cannot be only public research. It cannot be only farmers. It cannot be only indigenous people, social society, or it cannot be only donors. I will come and I certainly will come back to this discussion. The most important thing for transformation is, okay, we know the challenges. And I would like to add in 2 challenges because we speak about crop yield gaps. You know what the challenge is that we lost 134 million hectares of cropland in the last 20 years. That's the size of Peru. I mean, I mentioned this a little bit, but I think we need to put this in perspective. 134 million hectares lost for agricultural production. But there's one thing even more concerning. This is when you look farm workers, farmers, 200 million less people farming today than 20 years back. That means there's a reality out there. It's nice to have talks, but there's a reality out there. Less land, it's a reality. And the youth and the future of farming is under threat because also, no people would like to farm. And this is something we need to take into account. There's an urgent need. Now, when you think about transformation, and I will stop here and go later on in some of the details. Transformation yet started. We should not also say the agricultural system we have today is not good, because we were, however, able to increase by 50% agricultural production. We should not forget this, that we need to think about more sustainability, for sure. But we have also learned lessons learned from past, which can help us to fix this. The most important thing, and I imagine we will come back on this one, the UN talks are good. When I spend a lot of time in these UN talks, food system summits, I went to all of them, I was involved. The most important thing is, we should never forget, it's good to give general figures. The most important thing, no one size fits all solution. We need to think about the solution on the ground, and there's not one solution. And I think this is where it comes also to the thinking on crops and inclusiveness on the ground. We'll stop here because I think for me, what matters, inclusiveness, co-creation, and later on we can come up then with innovation on the other topics.
Thank you. The inclusiveness and co-creation, that really resonates. And as we know, it's really difficult to get all the voices around the table and all contributing and listened to and heard. It's really difficult. We've got a huge world. So many people are interested. So many people are trying to make a difference, but we still need to be inclusive. So Michael, you were talking about the issues and you seem to imply that you had potentially some answers there. What do you think is the most urgent lever for that systemic change in our food systems? And perhaps even more importantly, where should we start?
Look, Jackie, for me, the most important thing is, because here I'm speaking also as private sector, and I was several years the chair of the private sector mechanism at FAO on Committee on Food Security. And I think in far too many debates, and therefore I like also the approach of WAF, which is inclusive of the diversity of factors. The most important thing, first of all, is trust. We need to build trust within the different actors. And this is today, when I'm looking on the ground, it's not always happening. We need to emphasize complementarity. I give you an example. The International Seed Federation took an initiative 3 years back in Rwanda. It's called the Seed Resilience Initiative. What is the idea behind? To support farmers, to increase seed choice for farmers in Rwanda concerning, I will take now one of the aspects, vegetables. It's an idea where we brought diverse actors from the private sector together and we start to work together. with the authorities, with other donors, and with even governments who are present yet in Rwanda. And one thing I felt is, because we wanted to have this collaborative, not silos, because we have lots of donors doing things on the ground. The idea was behind, let's work together. Each of us can contribute, and this concretely working on the ground helped us also to achieve what, for instance, we have now results of harvests, and Petra mentioned before corn. Look, in Rwanda, with a variety which was available, you could have a 1,000 square meters, 100 kilograms. Today, on the plots we coordinated with farmers, we have 7,000 kilograms. Thanks to cooperation with the authorities, thanks to training, capacity building of farmers, and thanks also to trial improved varieties, which are and need to be locally adapted. This is, for me, it's good to talk, but it's more importantly also that we learn on the ground to trust each other. There are diverse solutions existing. Each of them has a role and is important. But more importantly is that we are all together able to increase seed choice for farmers.
Thank you very much, Michael. I like the word trust, because trust is so vital, whether it's internally within your own small area that you work in or you live in, and globally as well. If I could say, if we could avoid politics in all of this, I think we'd move forward even faster, but we live with what we have, but we can try and influence it. So thank you very much for that. You were mentioning public-private. Maybe this is an opportunity for Petra. Could you tell me what you think our most urgent lever is and where to start? Petra. I can't hear you.
That's it. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
You hear me now? Okay, sorry, I had to change my headset. The other went out of battery. So we know what we need to do, right? Stop deforestation, reduce methane from rice production, restore degraded soils, increase productivity. But somewhere here, it was said, and it's also in the chat. How do we get there? Because it's a systems approach. And we heard before, we need the public financing, we need the value chain engaged. So, and we need this end-to-end system. And we have found it incredibly difficult. I'm referencing Michael's point on trust, on, getting this community aligned, because there are all these emotions around business versus NGOs. There are these beliefs what good agriculture actually is. Is this with or without technologies? And the beliefs here are pretty hard. So what we found most useful as the way forward is actually if you have agreed outcomes. So you stop looking at the how you achieve a goal, but you align on what the goal is. For us, it's along higher yields, lower impact, and what are the outcomes we want to measure. And once you get there, you get this alignment and you get this trust going. What is still missing, however, is of course the making it viable from a financing perspective, because we haven't found yet a way to reward the farmer for the ecosystem services everybody is expecting. And we heard before about the need to repurpose subsidies possibly. You can also have it by regulation, by setting minimum standards. So we have been successful in, let's say, small in the terms of the global food scale, on smaller projects involving 150,000 cows with lower methane emissions for a food chain company. We are working value chain collaborations on tomato production in Egypt with a protocol that is both biodiversity friendly as well as securing the quality of the tomatoes. And then we find a demandeur, so a market player who is willing to pay for that particular product. But this is the alignment of the partners you need to achieve before you can start this. And this is what it could look like in practice. How to bring this to a system scale? I think if we were to get more on these agreements, what is the targets, like reducing these emissions, improving soil health, by that saving X million of land, and get this into the national determined contributions, it could be a hook then for all of the players to align behind this.
Thank you very much, Petra. Sometimes, we try and make a huge amount of impact because we want to help a lot of people and improve the world. And I like the way you were talking about the slightly smaller approach where you can focus a bit more and hopefully then scale out from there. But, often we talk of innovation as the solution. And certainly I like new innovations and tech, but many of our breakthroughs in research, for example, fail to reach scale. Michael, from your perspective, what do you think those major bottlenecks are? Why don't we've got a great technology, it's been tested, but we can't scale it. It doesn't get scaled. Nobody scales it. Any thoughts on that, Michael?
A lot of thoughts. And for me, perhaps we should also remind ourselves is there is not one innovation which will fix it. That's a reality also. I'm always say, careful to any company or even public research institute by saying, I found the solution. That's something very, I think, even dangerous in our talking. Now, one thing, and Amina mentioned in the beginning, and everybody agrees, today, the challenges we have in the fields and beyond with food losses and climate and all the other things, they will not go away. They will not go away. They will even increase. And I'm always saying, look, today, and let's give you an example. Crop. Crop yields are, on an average basis, impacted by 13% through to diseases. 13% of the crops means are nearly lost because of diseases. And diseases and pests are continuously increasing in this world of climate change. That's a reality. So do we have today the solution to focus, to fight against? No, we don't have it. There are certainly crop management issues. There are other products which can help us. But it's not enough. Can we wait that nature itself will find a solution? No. That means, therefore, the essence of research and development in agriculture is an essence on working with nature, cope with the challenges, and find the solutions. That means we need to invest in research and development. That's a no-brainer, and everybody mentioned it. And there is one reality out there. Amina mentioned it a little bit, and I'm coming also on the seeds part. Because lots of investments are happening. I'm fine, that's good. But very often investments are perhaps not exactly in the research and development where we need them. We need perhaps more money in research and development because also public sector investment in seeds, it's continuously decreasing. In a world we have more issues than ever. We have continuously less money spent in breeding research. When I'm saying breeding research, also for crops, which later on will come to the fields. And this is something we need to take into account. It's good to speak about these investments. It's good, more money is coming. It's good also to challenge the private sector to spend more. But I can tell you the private seed sector, 15 to 20%, a breeding company every year reinvests of its turnover into research and development. This is not investment for investment. It's the highest investment in any industry you can find because of all the challenges we face. The point is, this takes years also. Breeding programs takes years. One essential driver is that we are able to use all technologies. And we heard a lot yet about gene editing and a new AI in breeding. Wonderful tool, can help us. But this will be not from one day to another. This takes time, this takes years. Therefore, essential driver for innovation is predictability from rules, predictability for investments. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, and this is something, and we signed recently also a memorandum of understanding with CJR. It's the take-up of research, public research, or even private research to bring it to the farmers. The take-up to bring it to the farmers. We have sometimes wonderful innovations. We don't have the take-up by farmers because it cannot yet be used at that stage by farmers. That means this is something where we need to sit down together. Public-private partnerships. Private sector taking up material from public sector. Fine-tune it, adapt it, locally adapt it, bring it to the farmers. That means for me, coming back to your point, scalability of innovation, I took the example of innovations, depends on our concrete capacity to reach the farmers. Regulatory oversight, predictability of rules, but also our capacity to take up material from public sector, to fine-tune it, to bring it to farmers. We are not there, and we can go into many countries where today, coming back to my initial point, the farmers is the essential player for food systems. But in many countries, still the farmers has not the choice, the seed choice perhaps needed to supply in the right way food systems.
Thank you for that passionate view and stating so clearly that there's not just one solution, there's many contributing, and that's why people have to be around the table together. And I always say that if a technology is so good, so useful, it will leave the researchers' hands and get there. An example being the mobile phone. It costs money, it does. Smartphones cost money, yet many places I go, the farmers have them because they can use them to get information, markets, so on, contact their families. So that one got away from us, you know. Take up by farmers is not always happening. I'm sure there are trade-offs there. So Petra, what mechanisms or partnerships do you think are needed to bridge that research, whether public or private, policy, and then that field implementation, those farmers? How do you get there more effectively?
I was hoping for this question, Jacqueline, because there's so much I would like to add. So Michael was saying we always need new innovation for new problems to come. Yes, our research is sort of 10, 15, 20 years out, and this is where we're good at when is the next resistance or what is the next soil health problem or the next field. But the frustration is probably that the tools we have today are also not reaching the customer, and it's very, very different in different countries on why. In some of the developed countries, it's very much ideology because it's not wanted. It gets very hard to get registration for some products, in particular in Europe, because the risk management models are not aligned with what is actually relevant in practice. There is also this famous old example from around 2000, with golden rice, where a solution was available, rice seeds that lead to rice with increased vitamin A, and it wasn't adopted because it was GMO rice. So, I mean, what do you do? This is my solution, and let's look at the outcome and the technology, and let's move there. More practically, reaching smallholders, because we have the last mile problem. And how do we get to the farmer? We are super excited about digital. It's not that digital helps the farmer put the seed in the ground and grow it, but digital helps the farmer to have the right decisions and to understand what needs to be done. And with the small language models, we are making huge strides now in getting our digital solutions, educating farmers about what is possible, what they can do in certain situations to enable them to use the innovation they hopefully get access to in their local farmer service center. And for me, this is one of the biggest step change. So we see digital in reaching our customers. We see digital, of course, also in improving our own research and the models and all of this. But this customer-facing element is probably one of the big steps of the near future, which is in reach.
Thank you. I was going to probe you a little more on the use of AI and digital and so on, but perhaps we can come to that later if there's a question in the chat. Because as you're from the private sector, there at the moment, how can sustainability move from corporate commitment to get to that measurable transformation across the agri-food value chain, value web? And I strongly believe that we've got to accrue more profit to the farmers who have a lot of risk. To me, they're almost the ultimate mini private sector because they are working for profit. But how do you move, from corporate commitment to that measurable transformation? And what should we be measuring? Petra, to you, please.
Yeah. So probably we are all in a time of realization that strong corporate, there is no thing like corporate commitment. It needs to be embedded in the business model. So we can only get things to scale that have a business model that is then can be sustained for a couple of years. And the question then is, how do you get credibility also in part of this? And I'm super proud we have in Syngenta a model that measures the sustainability of the products we offer. So we measure every product we sell, both seeds and crop protection, by its sustainability benefit, by its additional soil health, so yield benefits, soil health benefits, and also we have a look at the things that stakeholders would like us to improve, like carbon footprint and environmental impact within. And so we have a very measurable tool to have a commitment to enable higher yields with lower impact, to translation into what does it mean, what is our portfolio like, what is our innovation like we are gonna sell. And this is what we take as a proof point for the progress across the technologies. We also have commitments, we measures like enabling regenerative agriculture. So we measure very clearly what are the projects we are having around the globe, like soil restoration projects. Where do we have collaborations with farmers, the value chain? Where do we have our enabling tools that enable regen ag? And so we have this commitment which we track every year. And so this, if you focus on measurable progress, what should we measure? So this is a way how within our company we track and incentivize the progress we make.
Can I just build on that, Petra? That's how your company measures. Do you get input directly from your customer farmers where they can also articulate maybe unintended positive consequences that you're not measuring but are good?
Well, our customers are interested in three things. This is why they buy our products. The first is yield, because that relates to income, so producing more. The second is profitability. So producing more with lower cost increases profitability. That's what they care for. And these are the two most relevant farmer benefits why a customer decides to purchase a seed, a seed treatment, or whatever. These are the two absolute measurements. The third thing the farmers are interested in is resilience, farm resilience. Can I maintain my farming today? Can I hand down my farm to my next generation? And for here, the measurement is less clear from a farmer perspective. We experiment around soil health. We are looking at mitigating against abiotic stress. But the whole reason and motivation on why farmers think in this long term is this preserving the value of their land for the generations to come. So this is the customer view as it shows up to us. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I think you managed to capture what the farmer really needs, your customer, and its overlapping data contributing. Looks good to me because everybody's got a voice in that particular environment that we're talking about, that value chain. But can we look at seed innovation and genetic diversity, Michael, quickly? The future is likely to be what we possibly can't even imagine from the point of view of agriculture, climate stressed for sure. How can that seed innovation that you've been talking about and the genetic diversity that is sitting in farmers' fields and in gene banks and so on, how does that contribute to resilient, productive and sustainable food systems, especially for smallholders and developing economies? Could you just try and answer that one for me?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. And perhaps one point I'm always like to make here is because you mentioned gene banks, I haven't preview to speak about gene banks and also biodiversity. It's of utmost importance, our joint responsibility. Gene banks preserving biodiversity is essential, but also, and this is a point I'm always saying, to cope with future challenges, the use and access to the diversity, to the crop diversity also sitting in gene banks, it's an important layer for us to be able to provide best solutions to farmers. Now, look, for me, I would like to say, because I started with this and I would like to come back to this, smallholder farmers in Africa. In several countries where smallholder farmers are facing the toughest issues with regard to climate challenges, with their capacity to cope with this situation, in most of these countries, you don't have seed choice. You don't have a private sector who is even able to provide a diversity of seeds. Therefore, it's good to speak about innovation, research and development, but just improved varieties, and can be a hybrid or can be whatever you want. Just to bring an improved variety, I'm not speaking about gene-edited variety, but just an improved variety can help farmers to cope with situation. And here is something we are clearly facing. That means very often we have a lot of potentially material within the private sector, but we are unable to go to market. That means to build a market in a country needs predictable rules, but on top of this needs also, and this is very important, and Petra mentioned this also, to build the profitability for a farmer. Very often also, it's not just enough to bring improved varieties to farmers, that's also agricultural practices which needs to be adapted. But also it's about to market. You need to build a value chain at the end also here. And I think that's for me also where we need to think about the systemic approach, not just to bring a new variety to a farmer. No, it's also to help the farmers or the farmers to find the right markets afterwards. That means the sustainability starts certainly with research and development, but the sustainability continues also later on a business level for the farmers. And I think this is where I'm thinking we need to think in a systemic way. The private sector, look, we have seed companies working, having breeding programs in over 80 crops. And a lot of public-private partnerships also in sometimes underutilized crops where the private sector is not investing for different reasons, but where can support also public breeding to bring it to the markets. That means this is where I see today one of the major issues when I'm thinking on this food insecurity raised by Amina is even to build the choice for farmers on just some improved varieties to get this to the farm is essential. The research and innovation, yes, but there is a reality out there where there is a linking pin, a missing linking pin.
Thank you very much. Fully agree with you. And also the importance of maintaining the genetic diversity of our crops. Even the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, the temperature is going up in the permafrost. So, we've got big problems in this world. I think we're getting there slowly, but slow is not fast enough. I think the private sector can do it faster. Some of the private sector can't do what Petra was talking about, which is actually getting to and working with farmers. Some of them don't do that. They say, here's a product, it's wonderful, get on with it. But let's get on to some of those questions that have come up in the chat. And I'm going to be very mean because I see that Amina has gone offline, but there's a question for her. And I'm wondering if Michael or Petra would be willing to look at it. Looking at trade-offs between investing in biodiversity and investing in agriculture or supporting small farmers. Can that trade-off be turned into win-win? Biodiversity versus, so investing in biodiversity, which is a key area of interest for Amina, versus investing in agriculture. Petra, you want to try?
I have a very clear view on this. It's one of my favorite questions, and look, you mentioned I come from healthcare. When I had to learn about agriculture, I figured out, and this is what the farmers also told me, agriculture in itself is anti-biodiversity, because on the field you want to have one crop and nothing else. So I was then wondering how we do this, and in my exploration, and sorry, many people know better as we. I believe we need to have it all. We must not trade off between food supply and biodiversity. The world is so complex, and the way to do this is to distinguish between biodiversity in field, biodiversity on farm, and biodiversity in nature. We can protect biodiversity in nature by increasing productivity on farm. We can increase biodiversity on farm by clever measures. We have lots of experience with multifunctional flower margins, leaving the least productive land untreated somewhere. So there's a lot you can do. Interval cropping. You can increase biodiversity on farm, and you can in some way also increase biodiversity in field when it comes on soil biodiversity by being very, very careful. What we don't find, however, useful is that we want to increase biodiversity on field by giving up on yield, by allowing, competition for nutrients and stuff. That's not the way forward, we believe. But there's a lot how you can align agriculture with biodiversity goals. I hope I could explain that.
That was very nicely answered. There's another question which is a bit more difficult for us to answer. Coming from Nosakari Aidiomawu, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. It's really, how do you integrate the realities of insecurity, which is causing major losses, like food loss, as opposed to food waste, the food loss? How do you deal with that? It's happening. You've got conflicts, transportation disruptions, and other things. And you're also going to get the climatic consequences causing these losses. So it's just, how can we manage that food loss before it even gets to our homes and in our restaurants, and then we waste it? Any thoughts on managing food losses?
Can
Petra, again?
I answer again? And Michael, I leave some space for you because this is such a complex question. And whenever I say we need to produce more food, people tell us, well, you just don't need to throw away so much. Now, in some of our breeding, we address this, and I visited our vegetable breeding center in Enkhuizen 4 weeks ago, and they told me proudly they have tomatoes that if you grow them in Africa and you put them on a car and bring them to the market, normally 30% are then broken and mashed when you come because the streets are so bad. With this new tomato innovation, they nearly all arrive in good space and you can sell them. That's just one innovation example. The other, you asking us, how do we solve the problems of the world, Jacqueline? We have to take into account that, hunger doesn't come necessarily from not producing enough food. It's an economic problem, a conflict problem, a climate problem if you have nothing to earn on your field. I would love we would have less of these problems on our world. Michael.
Thanks, Petra. Food loss and waste, I'm honored, but at the same time, it's a lot of pressure. Also, I'm one of the champions of SDG 12.3. That means to halve within the next years food waste and loss. And I'm always saying, and I mentioned this yesterday also. We should, yet how we speak about food loss, we should speak, and this is exactly where I'm coming at. We need to think about maximizing food production. It's not about speaking food loss, it's about how we are able to maximize food production. And by maximizing food production, we're also preserving biodiversity. Peter mentioned a nice example of tomatoes. I can give you another example, even for European markets. You take a lettuce. Everybody or many of us are eating lettuce. Due to the fact that with new breeding results, they can maintain 3-4 days the lettuce in a kind of fresh that it can be eaten. That's important because it's reducing every day. It's reducing. You keep it longer every day. 25% less food waste. There are things happening there, which certainly we should we should take into account. Now, to come back on the big point is we need, and this is what I'm always saying today, farmers in the fields. Yes, they're hidden by 30, 40, 50% times. And I heard even yesterday examples in Moldavia and Europe, 50% losses in the fields. Certainly, investment in breeding can help to cope with, and we have examples of improved varieties. But again, the point I'm coming at the end, this is linked to our capacity to bring this also to the farmers everywhere. I think this is where we need to think at national level, and we need to find the solution at national level for these locally adapted varieties.
Thank you. Another question for you, Michael, in the chat, targeted at you. Philosophical, I think. The success of the innovative solution mainly depends on social accessibility. What do you think about that?
Look, this is for me a point where I'm always saying, at the end, everybody agrees that innovation, research and development in agriculture is important. Everybody agrees on it. We cannot cope without research and development. And at the same time, we get these remarks on, oh, your innovation is not accepted, or it's or dangerous. I think the most important thing I'm always saying, and here I'm speaking for the seed sector specifically, we are working to bring products to the market in line with regulations in place, science and risk-based regulations for the benefit of the farmers and the society. You can imagine that for us, and therefore it's essential, the recognition of added value of research and development, and the recognition of also the opportunities we have with also new technologies. Perhaps we will get the same question on AI. AI certainly will be used in a very near future and is yet used today in breeding programs. It helps us also on the farms yet, AI. I think this is something where we need perhaps even to explain more, but that's a joint responsibility, because I'm saying very often, what we are doing as private sector, public sector is also doing it. That means we are all sitting in the same boat. Our joint responsibility also to get the social acceptability of innovation and research and development in agriculture.
Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of chat, which is about it's basically how do you feed, and I'm adding nourish our population today, while getting the biodiversity there and ensuring that soils, waters, is that perceived tension. I think if we took care of our environment, maybe that tension would not be so bad. I'm seeing it coming up in chat after chat. One more quick question for you, Michael, addressed to you. Oh, Petra, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I wanted to offer something as an answer to that. So again, let me call it science, where this is philosophical. Many people have different views on what science says. We are living in the world of alternative facts, right? But I think there is an increasing consensus that regenerative agriculture is trying to achieve all of what we tried to say. So protecting the soil, increasing biodiversity, lowering emissions from agriculture, protecting yield and yield resilience. And this is done through these famous 4 practices: no-till, cover crops, crop rotation, livestock, rotation, and also use of technology if used widely and if it's required. So we can align on this, and very, very much the question for rolling this out is then with all of these questions we are having before, it's a systems approach where we need the alignment of all players. And what we still believe getting there is most agreeing on what do we want to achieve with agriculture. Because the whole, is this leveraging the know-how of our ancestors? Is this agroecology? Is this sustainable intensification? You name it, it all boils down to this is all tools to achieve one thing. And to me, an agriculture which does not give up on yield, but also achieves improvements in the other 4 parameters I mentioned is sort of what I believe can be a consensus for a solution.
Thank you. I think we're coming to the end of the webinar. I'd like to ask both Michael and Petra, maybe Michael first, your closing reflections on this webinar, Transforming Global Food Systems for a Changing World. Just 1 minute, the take-home words for us, please.
First of all, I think it's very important the recognition of what the private sector can do and can support into solutions for the farmers and with the farmers. And I'm always saying it's with the farmers. This is essential because I see also some remarks in the chart. And secondly, thirdly, I'm coming back on. It's for me an absolute essential idea of this inclusiveness, public-private partnerships, collaboration also with the authorities at the specific also local level. Not just thinking about these global discussions we have. The point is we need to find the solution and the support at local level. And this is where I'm always saying food system starts with seeds. Seeds is the first essential layer of food systems. 80% of food systems is plant-based. We have an essential role to play. We cannot do it alone. We contribute, but we would like to contribute together with all the other actors on the ground.
Perfect, Michael. Thank you. Petra, your take-home message from all of this?
Look, Jacqueline, you have nicely managed, to get with, a tour de table about everything. And probably then sometimes we all are stuck in, okay, this is too big. I don't know. This will never work. And maybe the players start with something and be open to the tools to be used. The biggest problem also here is that we always have these infights. And Michael, you said the role is the private sector and technology. Just be open. Let's measure what we want to achieve, and then we can probably move forward together much faster if we have this mutual trust and alignment on the objectives. But don't get stuck in these fights and the problem is too big and you play and you can't play and all of this. So that's probably get started somewhere. It's my plea.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Petra. So coming to the end, thank you to the audience for joining in. We've had a lot of chats and we're recording them. So if we've not been able to address anything, I know some of you are in touch with some of the panelists. We'll try and address most of the questions that were asked. I would like to thank Amina, who unfortunately had to log off, Petra and Michael for contributing in such an open way and positively. I'd like to thank the WAF team for setting all this up so well. And I'd like to close with a quote from the Director General of FAO. He made it last year, Dr. Chu Dong-yu. And I think it resonates with what Petra said. The actions we take today will directly impact the future. We must produce more with less. Let's work towards a future that is more inclusive and more equitable. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to those of you who are speaking, Michael, Petra, thank you. And have a good evening, afternoon, night, whatever it is for you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Jackie.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.